Good afternoon. Welcome to week 2 of user-centered design in organizations. It is another week that will go by fast, and we do have a lot of materials. So I hope you had a good week. I hope you enjoyed the class from last week, and you will become more and more familiar with the actual content and the class structure. But I hope that you are excited and happy with what you have seen so far in terms of class and the material. Before we go into our topic today, and I know Sarah is probably very eager to introduce us to the topic, I just want to do a quick reminders of what we have covered last week, not so much about the topic itself, but just a few items. So we had some readings, and I do know, and I'm pretty sure that you guys had a chance to go through the readings and either discuss them as a group. And the case study, hopefully we're going to have a chance today to look at the case study or tomorrow, but I will open up some of the answers to Lucy's. Lucy had some challenges, but she also has a good story. So I will be more than happy. I've already put some answers into a PowerPoint or a PDF for you to be able to review and compare to some of your answers. But I really want to thank the teams that have sat down and took the time to go through the case study and the answers. You will see that we are going to be talking a lot about Lucy in the class. I think she was a very good intro. She's a real individual. I changed the name, but she's a great introduction to most of the topic that we will be discussing in class. And we're also going to be using Lucy as an example for our project with Roots Canada as well. So in terms of the project itself, thank you for submitting the names of the teams. As you've seen, I have created the places on the project team so that you can all go in and be able to do some collaborate sessions if you want. You can actually even post some of your answers as you've done to the case study. I can go in. I can actually use your answers to help me provide more elements and also answers to really what has happened to our Lucy at Rogers. So I want to thank you for those of you that have done that. And what else? Last week, then our project. So this week was the due date for our project or project plan, or at least a very good sense of what will be the team structure, what will be the activities that we're going to do in class with Roots. We are not going to be able to complete the project this week. Tomorrow, in our lab session, we are going to be talking about the project and the project plan and Roots all together, so that we prepare for next week. So that's okay. As I said, this is a project, and as with any businesses, we also have to adapt to the speed of the client. So we are learning about Roots. I already have a lot of notes about Roots as a business, but as we go through the topic of today and the topic and the following topic, you will understand things that we need to be paying attention so that we avoid falling into Lucy's. But every business is different. But we are already learning about Roots, and also one of the assignment or one of the questions or for the lab last week was to start thinking and researching about Roots. So tomorrow we're going to be talking just about Roots and the project, and you will see that we are already finding some information about them. So everybody has to come in and everybody has to start digging and thinking and reviewing the document. But if you have not done, Sarah has shared a document on Google Drive to really capture everything that we either have found or everything questions that we have, or what we do know about Roots as well. And then yesterday and last night we have spent a lot of time color coding, which will help us with our project plan and also start our activities. we can already do some work. In fact, there's a lot of things that we can do from some work. And speaking of roots, I'm meeting with them on Thursday afternoon. I will first have a quick meeting with them to introduce myself and speak about the class, speak about the teams and our objective, and get more insights for them. But next week, we should have our kickoff with them. So Wednesday afternoon of next week, we're going to use some time to have a kickoff and introduce. So we're going to need to prepare for this. But I feel good. I feel confident. But we need everybody, everybody. So tomorrow we're going to be spending more time, but if you haven't, please go in Google Drive, look at the document that Sarah has created. There you can put it's all live. We can all contribute. There's even a chat. So if there are several of us, we can actually chat and exchange together. So please do if you haven't. Everybody's going to be marked on all the assignments related to the project, and the first one is our project plan. So everybody has to come together. We have to deliver, and I will know who's participating and who's not participating. And participation is an element of contributing and being involved in the assignment. So there's a quality of the assignment. First of all, are we going to deliver the assignment? But the quality is as important, and who's participating is very important. So far, participation is very low. So we need to have more people to come in. So that was a bit of a recap from last week. Now, if we go into this week, which week number 2, but before I do so, are there any questions or comments? And I will share with you the structure for this week as well, for the lab or items that you have to do. Are there any questions from last week or anything about the logistic? If you have, please email or send me a course message. I'll be more than happy to assist you. There's a lot of material in this class, and having a project running in parallel with content, I know it's a lot for most of us, but I'm very confident that we will deliver good work and Roots will be really, really happy. But we really, really need to be super tight. Very, very important. So this week, we are going to be talking about organizational behavior and types. Today and tomorrow, and then tomorrow we're also going to have a big piece of tomorrow will be about the lab and the project, the big project. We have some readings for this week as well to do. Usually, I think I've opened up the week yesterday, and the readings were available. The slides for today's session, I will open them up after this session. And there's some items for the lab. The very first item for the lab is everybody has to sign the non-disclosure agreement. And it is one of the Word documents. So it's the Word document as one of the attached. And I'd like for everybody to read it, sign it, and then post it to the discussion board. I have provided a link. That would probably be the most efficient. And then what I will do is I will take them all and I will send them to Roots. If you have never signed an NDA, it's a non-disclosure agreement, means that we are telling Roots Canada that all information that we're going to learn about the business is going to be kept confidential. So we are not allowed to discuss any details about Roots Canada. Imagine they're sharing their business objective, they're sharing data, they're going to be sharing a lot about their house, their personality, about their business, and how they're doing and how they may be not doing so well. So very, very important that we take this all very seriously. So obviously, there's no commitment. There's no side effect to signing an NDA. In fact, you'll be signing NDAs in all of your career. You will be signing non-disclosure agreement with vendors. You'll be signing a non-disclosure agreement with your employer. It's a way to protect themselves, but also to protect yourself. In terms of information sharing. So they are also not allowed to share information about Humber or information that they may learn through us. So it's a mutual agreement, but it's a very, very important piece. And I need to have, everybody needs to read, everybody needs to sign it. So where there is something for you to do, it's highlighted in yellow on the non-disclosure agreement. There's no need, good question, Sarah, there's no need to have a witness for the NDAs. I just looked at, there's no need for a witness. So only you need to read it, and you need to fill out the information where I have put in yellow. So it's basically your name, your address, and then you read through the non-disclosure agreement. Some of it may sound not necessarily familiar because some of you may have never done it. But it's very, very typical. And as I said, there's no obligation. The only obligation is that you have to treat their information with very seriously, confidentially, and we cannot discuss routes or any of the information that we will learn through the project. And we can also not share information outside of this class with anyone. Yes, you can say that we're working on routes and we're doing a project for routes, but you can't really give details about what the project is all about. So you have to be very, very vague in the sense that no one needs to know that Roots is actually thinking of even doing a digital transformation. So because imagine if their competitor finds out, then maybe their competitor will try to speed up and accelerate and make some changes as well to their digital transformation or their digital strategy. So it shows how serious they are. So they're following a process. As a business, you will see they're probably more very formal as a business. But they're big, right? They have a lot of employees, they have a lot of vendors, they have a lot of suppliers. So very, very important to sign the NDA. And if I don't have an NDA signed, then that means you don't have access to Roots or any of the material until you have a signed NDA. You have to have a signed NDA to be able to participate in the class, and the project is 50% of your mark. So you pretty much have little options to not sign the NDA. Then tomorrow, we're going to talk about the high-level project plan. As I said, before we have a kickoff meeting with the client next week, hopefully it will be next week. I'm meeting with them on Thursday, but it's an introduction. But next week we will have a formal kickoff to welcome them, to welcome the team, and introduce yourself. And then I'd like for you to do some role play on running a meeting. I will most likely be facilitating because it's going to be our first big meeting with them. So, but try to get familiar with how do we run a project status meeting, because that will be very relevant for when we do a weekly updates and status with them. I will be meeting, as I said, with them on Thursday, and then I've also put a little about my conversation with James to give you some insights about maybe the business and how James is actually thinking. You will see my little notes suggest that he's doing some delegation. He's actually empowering his people. Things that we will learn and we'll discuss in class further, but I'm already sharing with you some hints. Then for the case study, I have some questions that I want you to think about the case study, and you'll be able to read the answers. And then I've put some more questions or hints or areas or things to consider when we look at what happened to Lucy and then us going into Roots. And if there's anything that we can do to help or avoid falling into the same challenges that Lucy had. So please take some time this week to go through the answers, which I will be posting and I will make available, and then start going through some of the questions for you to think through the lens of Lucy, but in the context of Roots. Then something that I have done this week as well for you is the journal. So we spoke about the journal. The journal is part of your mark, and I believe it's 20 or 30%. Let me just not misinform you. The reflective journal. So it's 20%. 20% of your mark will be about your journal. So what I have done in the lab this week, I've used some main headers. So one is the project, the big project, and then the case study, and then the journal. So I'm helping you and giving you some hints about things that you can start thinking about for your journal. But it does not mean that this is all of what you should include. I want you to reflect. I want you to think. And I give you a lot of ideas or thoughts for what your journal could be at every week in yeah, last week's presentation, definitely. And even here, so the reflective journal, things for you to think, but I would specifically like to see the items that I have mentioned in this week's lab in your journal on top of anything else that may actually come to you when it comes to the topic and things that you will discover this week. So that is the plan for the week. And then tomorrow we're going to be spending a lot of time on the lab. So, question on the chat. Hi, Professor. I have a few questions regarding labs and journals and how they work. I understand how the Roots project works in the reading, but I'm hoping you can clear up my confusion on the other things. I can come on the on the microphone to ask if you'd like. So we have two options, Thomas. What we can do is perhaps we can come back to this before today, or tomorrow we can also keep some time to at the lab to maybe go through some of the questions, or you can send me a message through the courseware. So I want to make sure that we cover the topic, but I do want to make sure that I'm going to be able to answer any questions that you might have. So if you believe that I can answer that in maybe a minute, then you can come on the mic if you like.
Yeah, I just have a few quick questions.
Yes.
So regarding the journals, do we have to, for our personal journals, do we have to do one for last week or just from this week on?
Your journals, that's a good question. The journal is really should start from since last week. So it's really for you to start thinking about your experience with the class. You as an individual, about any of the topics or any challenges that you may find in as we start the class. So really as of last week, and then you can start making notes. So you can, I would say, take a Word document, and then if you look at this week, I've said for this week specifically, you should start thinking about, or you should include in your journal, elements about the organizational type. So I would like for you to think which organizational type suits you the best, or suit UX the best. So we're going to talk about organizational types today. Sarah will introduce us, and then we're going to go in more details. But now in your journal, I'd like you to think or answer which organizational types do you think is best suited for UX? So if we want to have UX practice or UX teams, what kind of types, organizational type, do we think are best suited? And is there one or is there not one? I'd like for you to think about that. And then I've asked another question. Which organization type suits you the most? And then that will be based on personality and what you know today. But we are going to talk more about personality later. So, but start. So my goal was to give you some hints so that you can start writing, but you should be writing. And then if you look on every week, I also have a section that talks about reflective journals. And then you can think more like, how does this apply to you in terms of the topic of the week? What challenges maybe are you going to come across? Maybe you don't like to do project management or putting together a project class. And that is what we have to do this week. Then you could talk about why. Why don't you like that?
Okay, sounds good. And then just another thing regarding the journals, I also noticed in our group discussion board that there's a section called group journals. Is that separate from our personal journals?
You could use that. I think I don't know that tool, but you could use that if it helps you. But I don't know if it's at individual or I don't know if it's at the team level. But I do know that there's a journal tool in Collaborate that you can use. I have not explored it.
Oh, okay. I thought you put that there, like
no,
separate
but
thing
great
to do.
questions.
Okay.
It's there. You can use it. For now, you can use anything, any tool that you want to capture your journal or your thoughts. Collaborate or Blackboard has a tool, but I have not looked at it. I should probably look at it. It's really up to you.
Okay,
But
sounds
at this point, your journal is personal. It's individual.
All right, sounds good. And then just one more quick question about the labs. I tried going through the left sidebar, but I couldn't find anywhere where we specifically hand in the answers to the labs. And then also, I was just wondering, are you going to be posting like due dates for the labs? Because I haven't seen a specific due date for it. I'm just assuming it's Thursday.
Yes. So let's pause here. in terms of where the labs, elements of the labs, where do I expect the responses or the answers to the lab, okay? So what I will do is I will tell you what I want you to do with the lab. If we look at this week, or let's look at last week. So if we look at last week, then the lab had an item about this week's reading article. So I don't know if any of you had a chance to go through the articles and the reading, or even make notes of anything that has jumped at you. And then my instruction there was share your main points inside your project team space for my review. I'm able to go at any point into any of the project teams, and then I can see, for example, I can see on the discussion board if there's anything about that particular element. Notes from week 1 articles. Great. So there is a note. So Sumit has submitted their notes in the discussion board. So all of what you have to do is follow the instruction. I will tell you where I want that information for depending on the items. And then as a rule, the labs are really considered this week. This is the beginning of our week for this week. So our labs, there's no final date for submissions, but next week I may want you to share me if it's not on the discussion board, or if it's not available elsewhere. I may send you an email or to a Teams or to an individual and say, can you share me or send me what you have discovered in the lab? But I will try to send you or your teams in the discussion under your team as a discussion board, so I can go and I can read it. So last week I've added those instructions. They were not on day 1. So I've added those instructions on day 2 or day 3, I believe. So I will tell you where I want you to answer. And maybe sometime it's just for you to reflect.
Oh, so okay. Sounds good.
Yes.
And then I'm assuming then if you do post somewhere to put the answers, for example, for the group labs, if we have to hand something in on Blackboard, is it just one of our group members who hands it in, or do all of us have to hand it in separately?
It's only one.
Okay, sounds good.
And unless I want to see individual contribution. But
so you'll just let us know then.
Exactly. I will let you know if it's one or multiple submission.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
No, those are great questions, and sorry, this is a new class, and it's not typical. It's not a typical class, and I'm adapting, and your questions are helping me to be more clear. And if there's still things that are not clear, please let me know as well.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Awesome. And as a rule, I know you're not being marked for labs items, but this is really for you. The more you're doing the labs and the items, you're going to learn so much more from the class, and it will be better for you as a person when you get out and you go into the real world, because now you have a chance to explore and practice on your own. The challenge with this class, there's a lot of psychology and behavior in psychology, and it's not always black and white. And then when I want to hear from you directly, I will say, please submit individual responses, and I will tell you where. And then I go in and randomly. But when I look at the case study, everybody who submitted case studies, I've actually gone through all the answers. And now I just saw that we have some articles. So as a rule, try to do all your labs within the current week. And then throughout the week, I go in and I look at who has submitted and what people have said. Great. So when it comes to the project for this week, we had the project plan, but we know that there's a lot that needs to be done still for our plan, or even questions that we have. That lab and that piece of the lab, so far Sarah has created a document in the G Drive. She's added everybody, and that's pretty much where I expect everybody to do their contribution at this point. And then when we feel that we have the final project plan, maybe this is going to be it. Maybe this is going to be our document for the project plan. So for now, for a big project, it's really all on the G Drive, and we've been contributing, and we need more people to contribute. But thank you, great question, Thomas. Okay, so and I will make sure that it's becoming clearer and more clear for everybody as we go through the structure together. Let's go to week number 2. It's unbelievable how time flies, but because the course has so many elements, and it's somehow complex because we're running a business and we're learning at the same time. There's so much foundation to be put, and we're still putting the foundation in place, but it will get better and more clear as we go. So this week is organizational behaviors and types. So what do we mean by organizational behavior, and what do we mean by business type? This is what we will be learning for the next 25 minutes. And for every week, I need to have volunteers to introduce a topic. Now, I know there's a lot of content and there's a lot of material in this class and the labs. I don't want anybody to feel stressed about it, but I did create a discussion board where you guys can sign up if you want. Sarah was kind enough to sign up for this week. So, and I think she's going to do it herself. She's going to introduce us to the topic. And there's no format. I think she's just going to tell us verbally what she came across. And then that's pretty much going to be it today. Her intro, and then some slides about organizational behavior and organization. And then we probably going to need to continue tomorrow on more. But tomorrow we're going to have at least a full hour of going in the G Drive and working on the project plan together. So by today, we should understand a bit more about organizational behavior and the types of organizations that are out there. And then we're going to try to see through the lab this week, where do we think that Roots Canada actually fits in terms of organizational type? And then I've also asked you to think about or even reflect, is there an organization type that is more suited for user experience design? Because this is what you guys are primarily interested in. But are there conditions that need to be put in place for UX-centered design to better succeed? Again, think back to Lucy. There are many things that have happened to Lucy. She was a UX, user-centered design director with a lot of experiences. She's done it, and she's done it for long. But then she comes to a new place. Think of it. It's as if she would come to Roots Canada, and now she comes to a different place, different culture, different environment, where all the conditions in place to make her successful or not. And often that will depend on the people, on the organization itself, on the structure and how the business is structured, and on the type of businesses, how decisions are made. So this is what we're going to be discussing more. And why I introduce you to a case study is because there are many Lucys out there. And one day you all going to be Lucy. You're all going to face some form of what Lucy has faced in her job. And you need to be prepared. And how do we prepare, and when do we prepare? It really starts from the first conversation or the first moment that you actually think of applying for a job. And think about what we're doing now with Roots. So we are now about to go and be one of Roots' employee or partners. So if you were to think of being hired by Roots, you would go through a similar process. You would actually do some research about them to find out what people say about Roots, what do people say on the reviews and stuff. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to give the floor to Sarah. She has 5 minutes, and she can take less, she can take more, but not really more than 10 to kindly introduce our topic. So Sarah, it's all yours. Welcome. You can come on cam, you can stay voice if you want. It's up to you. So thank you, by the way. And you are the icebreaker for the weekly topic of the week.
Yay! Awesome!
Yay!
So I didn't prepare a formal presentation or anything. I just thought that I would speak about some of the readings and the things that I learned from the materials last week. So
awesome.
nothing too formal. So it's just gonna be me talking. Okay, so last week's readings and this week's lecture is going to be about sort of the basis of organizational behavior. So I did gather two definitions. They're sort of similar, but I'll read them both out because they sort of have their own meanings. The first one was from the Investopedia article, and I quote, "Organizational behavior is the academic study of how people act within groups. It's a principle applied in attempts to make businesses operate more effectively." So that's sort of the textbook definition. And the sort of loose definition that I gathered was it's basically how we can study the expected behavior of individuals in the workplace. And it's basically implying that no two employees are alike. Everyone has their own way of doing things, everyone has their own way of operating, and organizational behavior is sort of understanding the high level stuff and the nitty gritty. So some things that people that work on organizational behavior do, they can reorganize groups. So that could be, shift organization, making sure that the right people are working together, putting people on appropriate teams, modifying compensation structures, changing methods of performance evaluation, which is something that's kind of important as well. Everyone sort of deals with performance evaluations a little bit differently. Another thing that I have highlighted in like big bold letters here is that personality plays a role in the way a person interacts with groups and produces work. So that sort of goes into the more casual definition of what OB is. Another thing that I read is that power, authority, and politics all operate interdependently in a workplace, and they can actually help or they can hinder getting the work done. So it's important that you understand where all of these structures are and coming into play, and that's what OB is. So
That's
something
awesome.
I also read, sorry?
Yes. No, this is great. Go ahead, continue. You're doing great.
So something I also read that was really interesting, sort of the study of organizational behavior. There's this thing called the Hawthorne effect, which I thought was really cool. It's basically the way test subjects' behaviors may change when they know that somebody's watching them. And that's actually something that's very prevalent in the workplace, is when you're doing a review or you know that your boss is watching you, you're going to behave differently. So organizational behavior is taking that into context and being able to observe how people work and document how people work without making them feel like they're being watched or they're being surveyed in any way.
Yes.
So,
what is the name of the effect, Sarah? What is it called?
It's called the Hawthorne effect.
How do you spell Hawthorne?
I put it in the chat. It's
okay, great.
It's Hawthorne effect.
Oh, awesome. Remember, I'm French, English is my second language, and plus I don't know everything. It is fact. When you think you know everything, this is where you stop learning, right? So that's awesome. I love it. I'm curious about it.
For sure.
Great.
I would deliver this in French for you, but my French is absolutely horrendous. I haven't spoken French since high school, since grade 12, so.
No worries. It's hard if you don't practice it.
It is. It's crazy. So just sort of going on to different components of an organization, and this is something that organizational behavior kind of does, is it sort of categorizes things and it sort of gives you a framework for how an organization should optimally run. So there's this guy called Edgar Sheen.
Okay.
I'm probably saying that wrong. And he basically came up with 4 common elements of an organization structure. So he's an organizational behavioral specialist and has a background in psychology. And he sort of like came up to this criteria that the organizational behaviorists have to sort of look at when they're establishing a workplace. So 1, there's always a common purpose. 2, there's a coordinated effort. 3 is a division of labor. So that's basically when people perform tasks or don't perform tasks. The hierarchy of authority. And then the organization is always dictated by the size, the diversity of operations, and the environment. So those are the sort of 3 main things that come into play. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then basically I read, it was an article, it's called Why Your UX Design Really Failed. And it sort of goes into OB and psychology, and sort of some of the points that I picked up on and wrote some notes are I thought would be kind of relevant. There are 8 primary areas where organizational behavior factors into basically failure of the design process. So oftentimes it's not the process itself that's making the sort of team or the organization fall apart, oftentimes it's in the structure of the organization. Maybe there's too many silos, maybe people are not sharing information properly. So only having a vision is not enough. And this is something that's really stressed in organizational behavior and psychology, is that there needs to be a framework behind everything that you do. It keeps people consistent, it keeps people responsible, and it keeps everyone sort of flowing in the same direction. If you get a team right, you've got more than half the battle. And something I've written down here as well is that culture is the most important influencing factor of organizational behavior studies as well as innovative design. And this is something that a lot of the times, you know, if you're networking and stuff like that, a lot of people will tell you, oh, it's about the culture fit. And I used to not really know what that meant. And the more I sort of read into it, I thought to myself, okay, yeah, so this is you have to get along with who you're working with. You have to be able to fit yourself into the pre-existing team and sort of be able to like jump on track with the same sort of vision. And then this is a quote that I thought was really poignant, was, if there's more truth in the hallways than in the meetings, you have a serious problem. And that's like an actual direct quote from the article. And what you produce is essentially a direct reflection of your organizational structure and how well your management team and your leadership team uses these organizational behavior strategies.
That's awesome. Wow.
I think that's 5 minutes.
It's awesome. It's perfect. I think it was yeah, I think you're pretty much on 5, but I will say it's okay. Plus and minus is awesome. Well, you've put the bar high, so you did very well. Now, I don't want anybody else to feel very stressed. It could have been a sentence, it could have been a definition. And everybody is different, and everybody will have their own way to introduce the topic. But you did very good. So before I go in more details, do we have any students have any questions for Sarah or anything that you guys are curious to know in her discovery?
Oh.
Oh, wow.
I think that's a question. I think that's a question for you. I don't think that's a question for me. I think that's a question for you, because I actually don't know the answer to this. I'm going to be totally honest.
That's a great question. What do I think about workplace culture versus inclusive hiring? So I think there needs balance. You definitely need to be inclusive, because if you're not, then you're setting something about your business and about your culture. And that my little bell will go off, and I would say, okay, do I really want to work to a place that they're not being inclusive? I do think that there is room for all of us, and in fact, some of us have not had access to some of as maybe places or opportunities. So the future, you are the future, you are the today, you are the present. So when it comes to inclusive, I think everybody's looking at me, everybody's looking at you to be very inclusive and challenge a culture. A culture can be challenged. So you will find a company culture. Think of it, me, when I say company culture, the company culture is a personality. So it's a person. Think of a company as a person. Like, it's a bunch of us, there are a bunch of individuals, but at the end of the day, everybody's marching to what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. What can I do? What can I not do? What can I say? What can I not say? In every places, the rules will be different. But inclusive is us, it's people, individual. We are the culture as well. So that's the other thing. When we say business culture, we are the people. Even if the CEO says, this is what I want the culture to be about, his people will hire people that will come with a set of characteristic and a psychology and baggages that will make the culture. So you're going to learn more about culture. This is also one of the topics, but it's us. We are the culture. So, and when people say, well, and I've heard that so many times in my career, and even in my most recent job at Sunwing, my own staff would say, well, this is how it works here. Good luck. And I was like, no, this is not how it works. And then you may think, well, if it's the culture, But it starts with us. There are things as people that we need to be aware that we're doing that actually says something about the culture that maybe we don't even know. So it's very, very complex. It's complex, but at the same time, as Sarah said, there are frameworks, there are questions, there are things that us as people, we need to be aware of so that we know what to pay attention to understand the culture. We know to be aware of how inclusive are we in our hiring? How inclusive are we with our teams? How inclusive are we with our own people? So there's not one answer, but there's room for culture, and there's definitely room for inclusive hiring. And in fact, I think it's an obligation that we have as individuals to be inclusive, and then cultures will never go to the point where they're going to really be as prescriptive, I believe, as to who you should be hiring and not. And if they are, they're actually not following the HR, I would say the HR ethics as well. And that I would probably have even a discussion with HR and see how do we fix that, because, you know, I would be very worrisome. But we are going to learn more and more. So Sarah, that was awesome. I don't know if that answered your question, Hallie, I think. And but there's no one, but we definitely need to be more and more inclusive. In fact, on the topic of inclusive, when we are going to do our research and our study for roots, if we are going to go out and get people to come and potential customer or existing customer, we should see how are we going to be inclusive in our hiring of participants. So make a note of that. And it starts from us, right? In school and in the real life. So something I have written down that might be helpful: teams cannot thrive in a culture of fear and a lack of inclusivity. Awesome, Sarah. Yes, Google has done a very good study about safety. And if you see Google study research about safety and being safe and the benefits in that specific research, I don't remember the name of that research, you will find that Google has done a lot of research in-house to see the impact of safety and being safe. And people, unless people are safe and they feel safe in the organization, safe of making errors, safe of speaking up, safe of trying, they will not succeed. No matter how good the business are, no matter how smart we are in UX or how smart we are as marketing, if there's no sense that it's a safe place and we're not being managed by fear, you will not get results to business and people will leave. So we're going to talk more about consequences. So Ellie, when you say that's interesting, so interesting can mean I'm not sure if I'm 100% that I 100% understood, and again, I'm not looking for agreement, but I do want to make sure that that I did answer your questions, or that you feel that maybe there's another answer, or maybe there's something else to your question. Okay, so anytime anybody is welcome to reach out. Awesome. Yes, it's huge. Okay, so I took a lot of notes on Sarah, and it's already 1:18. This hour goes by so quickly. Now, I'm going to make the deck available for you, so anybody's going to be able to start reading it. But you're going to see a lot in my presentation, a lot of points that Sarah has actually covered. I would say Sarah could have done the topic today. She's presented pretty much all of it. So well done. Act. So here I have a few keywords. You've mentioned in one of the definitions, Sarah, it's about acting. How do people act in groups, individually? How do we create even like teams of how not everybody is the same, everybody's different, and that's a challenge. Everybody's different, every organization is different, and you're dealing with people, so you can take the same individual in a different setup and they're probably going to behave differently because the factors and the things that are happening around them. And the people will adapt to, oh, what can I say here in this organization? What can I not say in this organization? What do I need to do? What do I need to undo from what I've learned? If you remember Lucy has a lot of things she's learned in her previous job for 7 years. When she came to Rogers, she probably continued to do some of the things that were actually not helping her. So Sarah's mentioned about behaving in a way that it will actually help your success or hinder your success or actually work against you, right? So you do need to understand the people. You need to understand the politics, the power. Your quote said something about if you hear more, if you find out more about in the corridor of what is happening that you haven't heard at the meeting. Yes, very true. You're going to hear the concept of formal and informal organizational structure or org chart. So when you come to a business, they're going to show you an org chart, like really diagram the CEO and then the VPs, and then who reports into who and who makes decision. But you will hear sometime that there's also a informal organization chart that happens in the corridor outside of the business, outside of the meetings, that is probably the most influential and where big decisions are making. And I think Lucy has met some of that too. So authority, who's in charge, and who in the end makes decision is not necessarily always what you see in our chart. In fact, you're going to have employees that will go bypass their boss, their own boss, because they already have a connection to maybe with the CEO or the president. And then what happens to that poor Lucy or that poor manager? It's impossible to manage because they don't even have control within their own teams, or they don't even have either the authority or the trust. They haven't built the trust, or they haven't built the authority, or they don't even have the support from above because there's a direct channel happening that is not on the org chart that will actually make it very difficult for anybody to succeed. We also talk about organizational behavior is about predicting, being able to predict. So in groups, individuals, and businesses, the job structure, how we arrange, how do we organize individuals. Remember, we are all there together as individuals to bring success. Everybody has a role to play. Are we the structure in a way that we will deliver? Are we structure in a way that we can communicate? Are we structure in a way that we feel empowered? How do we reward our employees? How do we evaluate our employees? How do we give them feedback, constructive feedback? Can they give us feedback as a manager or not? So we also talk about personality, power, politics. Knowing all of these will help you. But the challenge that we have is it's really hard to know all of that before we even go to a business, right? So when you think of the interview process and the first interview, the second interview, maybe they're invited, as well in your business, you can meet the teams. So every little exposure is an opportunity for you to gain some insight. But the real thing will really happen when you actually get to the business. So what we see before we actually get to roots, what we see before we actually get to business is really just the point of the iceberg. And what they show you is probably not really what is happening. And in fact, there are some managers that don't really know what is truly happening in the corridor conversation. So you are in UX and you're in year 3 and you've learned about psychology, and some of you came from psychology. You've learned about research, you've learned about observation. Sarah said, observing, listening, looking beyond the words, looking at how people interact, and looking at what happens when someone speaks. Like you will see pattern very, very quickly. You've learned how to go and get answers without really asking the questions. We've learned through observation. We've learned about ethnography. We've learned about going into the field. So my advice, and this is what you need to do in this class, and maybe this is an element you can talk in the journal, is how do you take what you've learned to conduct user research to help you in doing your own investigation and your own research when we go to businesses, to make sure that you don't do what Lucy has done. At least to mitigate, at least to be better prepared. And let's do that with roots. And then I have a lot of hints on roots. We're already learning a lot about roots. So I'll open a parentheses. Our main client, James, he's been there for 23 years. I believe the director of user experience has been there for 20 years. Someone else has been there for 10 years. Long time at Roots. And the chances are Some of them, they probably work in the retail store. They probably work in the stores. And then they were best, they were super good, and then got promoted, and then now became director of UX. Some of them became director of analytics, whatsoever. There is a long service. The average is very long. What does this mean as well? And what does this mean in terms of how they even learn about UX and how they learn? And what does this mean for us coming to them who's been there for so long? And what can we find out from them without asking them the question? So the thing is, the trick is we have to find out the answers where we think it's relevant without asking the question. So thinks about these things. It's 1:25. The hour is already gone. So but Sarah has covered a lot of the items in the deck today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the deck and see where we may actually be able to pick it up. If there's tomorrow, we're going to do an hour of continuing the conversation and going through the deck. But we've been covering. But we're going to talk more about the organizational types to give you some hints on where is roots and maybe there are types that are better for not and are not for you based on your personality. So again, thank you, and thank you for the questions about the logistic and where do I expect you, but I will make sure that it's very clear where and when, if it's individual or by group, and I will continue to look at some of the answers that some of you have provided in discussion. And thank you, Sarah. Big hands of applause for Sarah who came forward. And for next week, I'd love to have someone else to volunteer. It does not have to be long. And it can just be verbal. It can be a definition. It can be a video, whatsoever. So the format is very flexible. So thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow for our hour 2 and 3 in the afternoon. If there are any questions, I can stick around as well. But otherwise, you guys, I wish you a good afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.